Good afternoon. I am pleased to be with you today. I would like to begin by expressing gratitude to all who have made this virtual conference possible. Thank you to the Quadruplicity Planning Committee and the Business Women's Roundtable of the Charlottesville Regional Chamber of Commerce for your resilience and creativity. And a special word of thanks to Janie Cast of Allison Partners for the invitation to speak. Gratitude to Power Up Video and Chasky Global for making this virtual connection possible. Finally, I owe a debt of gratitude to Mike Murphy, who has become my barometer for professional excellence. Let us begin. Part of my role in concluding the program is to remind us of where we have been and to draw our attention to the path forward, where we can be. This morning, we heard from a successful local entrepreneur and business leader, Sasha Farmer Tripp. She gave us an inspirational start to the day. Then there were the content-rich sessions with subject matter experts where we learned to build relationships that matter through the art of human exchange, how to manage workplace stress through breathing for balance, connection, and growth, connection with intuitive self to gain courage to create work that lights us up. And we learned that financial fitness includes the currency of plenty, all in the spirit of cultivating connections with self and others. What an interesting time to digest such information. We have received the gifts of our speakers and are now tasked to begin thinking about how we will apply the knowledge gained in our daily lives. I recently attended a COVID-19 resiliency workshop where participants were encouraged to think about change in digestible chunks that could be sustained. Think meta goal, run a marathon, meets micro goal, put on my running shoes at 7:30 a.m. I am about to share my thoughts on the current state of society and the power of our individual connections to fuel systemic change. I encourage you to think about your digestible chunks, the incremental and sustainable commitments that you can make to drive change. Between COVID-19 and the societal pandemic of systemic racism against Black Americans, I dare say that our minds and hearts are in unfamiliar territory. As I address you today, I hold hope and discouragement in each hand. I can't tell you the precise weight of each at present, but I know that they are both there and I feel their heft. The world, our nation, and our community are in the midst of a great challenge. You might easily imagine that crisis to be related to public health, the scientific complexities of our current circumstances, economic insecurity, or the uncertainty of what lies ahead. You aren't wrong. Those concerns are real and pressing. Whether you are someone living with the concerns about health and financial well-being of yourself and others, or a person having the realization that systems of racism are ever present and thriving. Perhaps you have a long history in the fight for justice, or you are someone for whom the fight is not an option, but a circumstance of birth. No matter where you are on the continuum of introspection and growth, it is a disconnected and disquieting season. Disconnected because we as individuals and the world are emerging from a time of varying degrees of isolation. It has been a time of compulsory choice about relationships outside of one's household or employment. Even in those spaces, there was adjustment and realignment. Parents and caregivers renegotiating often more time-intensive relationships with their offspring or charges. employees exhibiting agility as they abruptly transitioned to a virtual workplace and sometimes having difficulty making the commute to another room for work. Thriving professionals making a sudden transition to teachers and caregivers, and perhaps joining the ranks of the roughly 30 million unemployed. No matter what your circumstance, the nature of your connections changed and likely contracted during this season of self and societal protection. Self and societal protection bring me to the disquieting elements of this season. Medical workers with 12 years of post-secondary education or none are the front line between our lives and a nearly imperceptible killer. We cheer them for being our human barricade and our saving grace, despite providing them with subpar protection and tools to do their work. Offshore supply chains, while one-time fiscally prudent, have proven a fissure in the fabric that protects and stabilizes our society. Those who teach can hardly break into the middle class and struggle to pay for the educations of their own children. And suddenly, most of us at home, face to face with our children and the tools of the teaching trade, have realized the infinite value of professional educators. And then there are the grocery, pharmacy, delivery, transportation, and other typically poorly compensated, yet essential workers. They have become our lifeline, despite many earning less than a living wage. Further, to slow the spread and eradicate the illness, people need to be able to access protective provisions and testing. Alas, so many of our fellow Americans are unable to access health care. What a dilemma when we are no healthier than the sickest among us. The importance and priority of our connections have shifted to those historically taken for granted by our society. It is disquieting that we are only now coming to understand the fallacy of our historic priorities. It is a disconnected and disquieting season. As I was preparing for this talk, it was both surprising and instinctual to pen my first poem since grade school. I share it with you now. To be clear, Black Lives Matter. Whether it was our tilling of the land that brought wealth to birth a nation, or the life-giving force of our breasts feeding the white master's children, the blood plasma that breathes life into the sick, or the stoplight that governs our roads. Slave labor gave way to prison labor. Redlining and Jim Crow's finessed subjugation codified the unification between the racial and economic divide. Strange fruit hanging from a tree in the form of lynching, or roadkill at the strength of one man's knee. We are reckoning with the reality of our past and present. Even more so, we are at a crossroads. It is often darkest before the dawn, and I believe that we can draw dawn closer to us. A poem. Today, I am focused on the disastrous lack of empathy, the callous disregard for the underrepresented, and the stubborn durability of structural inequalities and racism. Today, I am hopeful that we see global scientific collaboration, that Mother Earth shows us she can heal herself, and that we have the privilege to live in a community that bands together to respond to crisis. Today, I challenge myself and others to ask the question, is our response sufficient? There may be evidence to some that efforts have been timely, thoughtful, and extensive, and I would have to agree. It makes me hopeful to be in community with the smart and generous among the architects of goodwill. As to the question of sufficiency, I am afraid the evidence tilts to efforts being woefully inadequate and lacking in the determination and persistence required. Today, I challenge myself and others to ask the question, how will we make a collective impact and find lasting change? Change with staying power, sticky change, turn the tide change, gritty, enduring, determined, in it together, change. That change is hopeful to me. That change is exciting. That change inspires enthusiasm and makes me eager to do the work required to get there. That change is hard. That change is uncomfortable and exhausting. That change is met at many turns with pernicious doubts, attitudes, and structures that are quite content with how things are, or better said, not how they are, but how they used to be. To borrow from my alma mater, the University of Virginia, I believe we are capable of greatness and goodness. I see the evidence all the time, in fits and spurts, episodically, occasional, irregular, disjointed greatness and goodness. On August 11 and 12, our community showed up, stood up, and exhibited courage and conviction in the face of hate. And as a result, we suffered the most sacred of losses, Heather Heyer's life. We also faced the reality of being at once determined to heal and broadly perceived as the objectionable front line. The months that followed were punctuated with long, emotive city council sessions, book clubs to create great awareness of others, a push to diversify boards, creation of diversity, equity, inclusion committees, and so much more. There was also an eagerness to distance ourselves from the hate-fueled intruders. Our melanated brethren at once had a glimpse of solidarity and, dare I say, hope. As the days and weeks passed, City Council slowly regained its pre-A1112 rhythm. The book clubs languished, board development priorities shifted, and the committee recommendations were taken in part or disregarded. And the narrative of distancing ourselves evolved into a strong message that those peddlers of hate were not from among us. We are good people. People of a richer hue watched that glimmer of hope disappear in the distance, as if a fallen star or a dream that never really happened. But it did happen, and hope was lost like sand in their hands. I will illustrate this another way. A study was conducted on mice. One group received food when the lever was tapped. One group received no food when the lever was tapped. And one group inconsistently received food when the lever was tapped. In the end, the mice that could get food predictably when the lever was tapped were happiest. Second happiest were the mice who received no food when the lever was tapped. Most distraught were the mice subjected to the inconsistent lever and unpredictable food. There is a particular bitterness in the taste of lost hope. May we remember our impact and take steps to avoid doing it again by moving from intermittent to sustained behaviors, recognizing that our lost interest results in another's lost hope. Now, we are nearly 3 years from those fateful days in August, and we find ourselves in a new season of awareness and outrage. People are marching. The book clubs are starting. There is fervor about diversifying boards. Committees are being formed as we speak. Will this be intermittent or sustained behavior? I posit that the recipe for sustained change is as simple as ABC. Aware, build, change. Core to this process is commitment and cultivating connections, meaningful relationships beyond your orbital pattern. We live in community. There is an interconnectedness of our human and global ecosystems. We are interdependent and thrive on connection as evidenced by the nearly universal chafing during isolation and social distancing. As we cultivate connection again, it is important to recognize that connection is not only about the first point, it is about the ripple. Think of a rock hitting the water and imagine that the first ripple is the connection between you and another. Then imagine how those ripples continue. That is the same power and potential as a new relationship. Move forward mindful of our interdependence. Cultivate connections as a seed to grow meaningful relationships with people beyond your orbital pattern. Most people will think I mean find a friend of a different race or ethnicity. Yes, and patron businesses owned by women and people of color. Try doing your weekly shop in a different grocery store. Scrutinize the composition of the social circles of your family, your children. Then move forward with sustained intent and remembering. Trust is earned, not given, and behavior an infinitely larger deposit than a word. Use your power, and every human has power, to create opportunities for others. Embrace that the journey is so much more than any destination. Continuously learn and grow so that you are a worthy recipient of the opportunity to connect with another. Be both gracious and shrewd. Be gentle with yourself by always remembering that growth comes at the nexus of challenge and support. You need to grow, and it won't be easy. Keep going. Hone your observational and deductive reasoning skills so that you don't tax others by expecting them to give their energy to teach you something that you could reason with the focused attention that can accompany prioritization. Do your own work first. I spend my days thinking about big, hard ideas: inclusion, diversity, community, and environmental sustainability. And the weight of those complex and expansive topics could be crushing if carried like Atlas. If I believed that the solution was to be found in self, in me, rather, I think about the interconnected nature of our world, the power of connectedness. I don't have to have it. I need to know where to get it, how to find it. I need to be in relationship. I find solace in my certainty that individual choices have collective impact. Individual choices have collective impact. We live on stolen land in an economy built on the bodies and lives of stolen people, in a country founded by migrants and expanded through immigration. We are the descendants of that legacy. And yet, we are more alike than different. There are more points of connection than separation. Why not live curiously and consistently? Relationship begins in the comfort of commonality, and it deepens through the courage to embrace difference. May you have the courage to embrace difference and the endurance to engender hope. Thank you.